Welcome to the Happy Mindset, episode 142. Today's episode is called K.I.S.S. So today is an episode about this acronym called K.I.S.S. It stands for Keep It Simple, Stupid. This is an acronym that I came across in computer programming. It's an acronym that can apply to everything in life. It was just that I happened to come across it first in computer programming because it is very relevant in computer programming because of the nature of it. Programming is very, very complex. So when you've got it in mind that you want to keep things as simple as possible day by day, it just minimizes unnecessary complexity that you can easily get into. I'll just explore a little bit about why I think we get too complex in things sometimes as well. I think there's a lot of psychology behind that. I'll just talk about from my experience what I've witnessed in myself, the tendency of why I was trying to make things more complex than they needed to be. A lot of different levels to it, and I'm still unfolding with it. On one level, I found that understanding complexity gives you a sense of, it gives you an ego boost. It gives you a sense of being smarter than other people. So there is a tendency to not want to make it simpler for other people because you've put in so much time and effort trying to figure out something that's complex. You don't want to make it easy for somebody else. That can happen. Another thing that can happen is that you can hide behind complexity. So if you're speaking in jargon, speaking in abstract terms, it feels safer because you're not really showing yourself, you're not really revealing yourself. If you use simple words, if you're trying to relay your message in a simple way to people, they see who you are, they see what you're trying to get across, and that feels quite vulnerable. So I found that myself, especially when I was in the realm of exploring consciousness, when I was looking into consciousness and thought and feeling and all that kind of stuff that was useful. It was useful for me to explore all that abstract stuff. But if I didn't start feeling into things and simplifying things, it didn't have much actual real impact on my life. My life wasn't really changing. I didn't feel like I was connecting with what I wanted to do more. So just recently, I watched the film Lowry, Mrs. Lowry and Son. It talks about L.S. Lowry. He was an artist in Britain, quite a well-known artist. I'd never actually heard of him before. So it was quite interesting, this film, for me. What I got from that film was the simplicity to what he was doing. He repeated one thing quite a few times. I think it was that I'm a painter, nothing more, nothing less. That simplicity there. And what I got from the film anyway was that this guy was in an industrial era, and he was painting what he saw. No delusions. He was using his imagination in a way, that creative way, reflecting the reality of a situation. So that was simplicity. So he was just feeling things and he was painting what he saw, which is a vulnerable thing to do, to actually reflect what you're seeing, because you're bearing yourself. You're showing the world that this is what I'm seeing, this is my perception. And that's a difficult thing to do, because what you'll find in mainstream is that the masses of people, groups of people, are generally influenced by what they think they should be looking at, what they think they should be seeing. Another thing, even in that film, in Lowry and Mrs. Lowry and Son, another thing that was quite impactful was when he was talking about seeing a bearded woman in the bus. It felt like he was making it up for his mother. Don't know, maybe he saw that. But she couldn't comprehend that somebody like that could have self-acceptance, or they could have an elegance to themselves. She didn't want to hear that. She just saw it as a freak show, like a distortion. It wasn't beauty in it. Whereas he could see that. He could look beyond the surface level and feel that there was a dignity to this person, there was a self-acceptance to this person that isn't very common. So that's the simplicity there in art that I really appreciated, because I guess what I want to explore this here is that, looking at from my experience, I've got so many different interests, but I keep that in mind, the K.I.S.S approach to things, and I think about it in terms of day by day. So when I'm challenged by something that I need to change in my life, what I have found has worked for me in the past, it's only something I've been more and more realizing, is just breaking it down. Just taking it day by day. That's how you learn programming. It's such a large topic. It's such a complex topic. The only way to break it down is to approach it day by day, really drip feed. You can do the same thing with problems in your life. I'm starting to realize that more and more. That the reason I struggle to change something in my life is because I've had this kind of end goal in mind, but I haven't really done what I need to do day by day to tackle that. And if you're struggling with that too, where you imagine an end goal and you just want to get there, you want to be out of your problem, what I'm starting to realize that helps is to question what feeling you're looking for from that solution. Like what you think that image is going to give you on a feeling level. Because what I'm starting to notice more and more is it's day to day. It's connecting with that feeling. Like when you're engaging in whatever habit or whatever thing you're doing that you feel isn't serving you, focus on how do you feel when you do it. Like when you do that habit, or just focus on what's the feeling you're trying to avoid. That's what I'm exploring more and more. So that's keeping it simple, day by day. That keeps me, I'm just getting through today. I'm just getting through tomorrow with this. I'm just getting through the next day. I just focus on actually just today. I'm going to get through today. I'm going to pay attention to my feeling, how I'm feeling today. Just observe that, pay attention to that. And I suppose this is where the self-compassion comes in. If you do fail, just be curious about what was I feeling when I went into that habit or when I was distracted. So for me, sometimes it's just being distracted by other people's agendas, people wanting me to do things, and a lot of that can boil down to I just don't have the confidence in myself, and I don't place enough importance on the work that I'm doing that I feel is important for me to be doing. So it's being aware that how am I feeling when somebody's engaging with me and distracting me from my work? How am I feeling about myself? Like what are the kind of feelings going on there? Because when you're not paying attention to these types of things, which are very nuanced and very subtle, there'll be a tendency to have a picture in your head of where you want to go. That's a delusion. That's not grounded in reality. Assuming that this image you have of where you want to be is going to give you these feelings. It'll often be feelings of safety, feelings of self-acceptance. Really speaking from my own experience, what I'm really trying to get at is just this kind of self-acceptance. And where I've run into a lot of difficulties is society will tell you the things that you should want in order to get this self-acceptance. They're not even telling you that, it's just subliminal. It's that type of thing. So it's really questioning that. So that can help you to slow down more. So even, for example, take my podcast, take my books, the stuff I'm writing. There's so much stuff to this now that I'm starting to see after 3 years. No wonder I was struggling at the start to simplify it, because it wasn't something that was supposed to be simplified. It was something that was supposed to organically evolve over time, because I've reached so many points where I've been, I'm just going to focus on this for the podcast. I'm just going to focus on that for the podcast. But I always felt like I was pigeonholing myself. I wasn't exploring the whole thing that I wanted to explore. And that's what I'm noticing as I move through this. I still keep the K.I.S.S in mind. So if you look at my website, if you look at my podcast, if you look at my writing, you'll notice there's it's slightly becoming more simplified. It's becoming more clear, yet at the same time, there's a lot of complexity still to what I'm doing. So that's what I feel with art and creativity. You become a person of contradictions. There's so many contradictions to yourself. So this podcast is called K.I.S.S. Yet what I'm also encouraging you to do is to explore nuance, which is very, very complex. So you're balancing complexity with simplicity, finding that balance. And I think you can only feel that out if you're going to do that properly. You can go into a K.I.S.S mindset and block yourself off from what you're feeling and exploring things that are of interest to you. You can go into that type of mindset. And then the other thing is that you can go into just a pure feeling thing where there's no practical substance to anything you're doing. So it's finding that balance there, feeling things out. The feeling things out part it takes time. So I guess another thing that can be helpful here, in programming, in web development, there's frameworks you'll use. So a framework, that's the simplest way I can describe a framework from my understanding of what I know about frameworks. A framework is just like scaffolding. It's like building blocks. So you just need to understand how to manipulate the building blocks to build the website. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. So this K.I.S.S framework is a framework I can use to just keep things simple. So that's the framework that's there, but I'm putting all the content within that framework. So as I'm moving through things, as my skill level is evolving, as I'm getting to know myself, as I'm getting to understand what I'm trying to do here, that K.I.S.S framework that I have in mind helps me to realize that, okay, as I'm navigating through all this stuff, it also needs to be presentable to other people. It needs to be simple. That's where the framework comes in. The framework, so another way of looking at this, as a user of a website, you just see the UI, the user interface. That's all you see. You don't see any of the code behind the interface. So that's the thing I have in mind here. As I'm navigating through a lot of complexity, as I'm exploring a lot of different things, I constantly kind of refine my website. So, or even the description to the podcast, what this is about. So if you looked at my podcast maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, I would have probably focused more on mindset and happiness, because I was still getting distracted by the fact that I thought people would focus on the happy mindset and focus on that. It's a bit meta there, because it's what I've actually found is that I think 2 years ago I was on the verge of changing the name of the podcast, because I was sick of this struggle in my mind of people focusing on happy mindset, as in positive thinking, delusion, that type of stuff. In my experience, I'm the exact opposite to that. I'm all about seeing through the delusion, seeing reality for what it is, which is a lifelong process, because reality, I don't think you'd ever get to a clear understanding of reality. It's an exploration, it's a journey. But anyway, that's when I realized that I wanted to change the name. I think, what was the name that I wanted to come up with again? It was Own Your Story or something like that, because I was in the process of owning my story through my first book. And then I realized, well, people misinterpret that in some other way as well. There'll be some other thing. And I completely forgot about the name after that, for the year after that. I was like, yeah, you might notice that, I think, in social media, as the imagery has come into it with the illustrations and the drawings, there's not much of a focus on the name of my podcast anymore. Even when people talk to me about my podcast, it's usually just, what are you up to with your podcast? I don't really refer to the name too much anymore unless it comes up. And I like that in a sense, because a lot of what I'm doing here is to help people to question words in the first place, or assumptions around words, or assumptions around. So if somebody saw my podcast, The Happy Mindset, knew nothing about me, knew nothing about my story. Even from my perspective, if I came across a podcast called The Happy Mindset, knew nothing about the person, knew nothing about what they're all about, their experiences, I would assume this is a positive thinking podcast. That's what I would assume. That would be the basic assumption here. So in a way, it's useful, because this is what I'm doing here. I'm helping people to question assumptions, question language, rethink this stuff, so that you can see the power and the impact of words and language in your day-to-day life. So it's kind of fitting, it's paradoxical in a way. Again, it's contradictions. It's contradictions and nuance you're dealing with. And that, I think, ties into compassion. So when you realize how complex and yet how simple life can be, you have more of a reason to listen to other people in a genuine way, because you realize that they could have insights in life that could be actually very useful to me. And also, what you're doing there, when you're genuinely listening to somebody and they're genuinely expressing themselves, there's a sense of connection. You need that. You need both of that. You need to be genuinely wanting to listen to somebody, and they need to also genuinely express themselves to have a feeling of connection. I think that's why there's a lot of unhappiness in the world today. I think a lot of us are disconnected. That's what I felt in my life. I spent a lot of my life feeling disconnected without knowing that that's what was going on. I wasn't genuinely listening, or I wasn't genuinely expressing myself a lot. And I didn't meet a lot of other people either who were genuinely listening or genuinely expressing themselves. I think that tied a little bit into the law of attraction there. I don't go down that rabbit hole at all, but I do believe that when you're more comfortable with yourself, you will start attracting that. And it won't necessarily be different people, it's just you'll bring out aspects of people that they didn't know was within them just by you being you. That's what I found in my life. Whenever I'm around somebody I feel who's genuine, sincere, who's expressing their passion for what they do, their passion for life, it brings that out in me. So I could, 80 other people, like, most of the people in my life could be interacting with me and never seeing that, and then that one person who's interacting with me like that will see a different side of myself that I didn't even know was a side of myself. So that's the way I kind of would think a little bit about the law of attraction. I don't even think about it, to be honest, but that's the way I kind of view it. I think it's more vibrational. I think it's like it takes care of itself once you're you. You don't have to think about it. Because again, it's one of those things that you're going to simplify something that's very complex because it's working on a feeling level rather than a thinking level. So that's kind of the process here. Finding the balance here between simplicity, complexity. That's why I like art so much. Because you can't convey something complex without feeling, without nuance, without life experience. And then you're constantly thinking about, how do I simplify this? How do I get this across in a way that it's not just me that can relate to this and understand this, it's other people can relate to this and understand this. So I was tied back to L.S. Lowry again. His drawings, well, some of the drawings that I saw in that episode, some of them were simple. Like in one of the drawings, like the people were just so simple, but then you could see in the people that you could feel that it was quite soul draining, the environment they're in. Some of them had their heads down. You feel like there was a lack of soul there. I think he even talked about that in the film, just around a group of people and feeling alone. And what you pinpointed it there is that people just walking around each other without a sense of who they are, without that kind of soul. It's been kind of drained from them, from their environment. So, fascinating movie. I think it was in the 1930s. I think it was 1939 was the main year that they focused on. Yeah, an interesting movie. I'd recommend it. I watched it on Netflix. It might still be on there if you want to check it out. And that's it mainly today. I just wanted to cover that. I think K.I.S.S is a very useful framework to keep in mind to achieving any goals, and to also just keep you in the present moment. It really helps you to remember how much our brains can complicate things if we're not aware to how the brain's working. The brain really, really overcomplicates things. And also just have compassion with that. You're working with that. You're trying to do your best. You're doing your best. That's another thing to keep in mind here. You're doing your best. You're trying to keep it simple. You're trying to be humble. And yeah, just keep that in mind. Kids can help you as a person who's a polymath, who's got multiple different interests. I wouldn't push it to the side because you're not a specialist or anything. I think it actually complements you a lot. I think that's actually one of the keys to polymath learning, is to keep it simple. Because if you get bogged down in complexity, you're more likely to not want to go into another field after that. I even found that with a few of the people I kind of was friends with in my French class in university. I had a conversation with one guy in particular, and I felt like because there was so much work that went into learning French, we were talking about learning other language like Spanish or another language that's kind of similar, and I don't think he wanted to do it because there was so much work that went into learning French. The way they approached that we did to learn French, which was very, very, it was very thorough. I must say, in fairness, that the education side of things, the education system approach to learning, it's very thorough. It covers a lot of bases, but it doesn't do a great job of connecting the knowledge together in a practical, application-based way. When it comes to language learning, it doesn't do a great job at that. Because what happens with learning is that if you're not using it, or if you don't see the practical application of it, it doesn't stick at all. It's pretty useless. It's just information that you don't know what to do with. It's just random information you don't know what to do with. So so what I found, keep it simple as a polymath. You'll get to the more important stuff quicker. Then you'll see the application part of the important stuff. Programming is a great field for that. Because if you've got a project in mind, you can use the K.I.S.S approach then. You're like, this will be a question that you can use. Will learning this concept help me to build this project? Yes or no? If yes, then you learn it, you apply it. If no, then you can keep that concept for later if it's not relevant right now. Same thing with languages. It was synonyms I used this for. So I learned one word here. Do I need to learn the other 9 words? No, I don't need to learn them from now. I'll learn them as I evolve. Same thing even with animals. It'd be like, what is the most common pet people have? They generally have. Generally, they'll have a cat or a dog. That's it. Start learning that. And then when you meet the people who've got hamsters, who've got ferret or zebra or rhinoceros, you learn that in context then. It sticks after that. That's the best way. That's a keep it simple approach. But that's it. I like thinking about this stuff. I like talking about this stuff, K.I.S.S, and applying that to polymathy and just learning stuff in general, experimenting. So that's it for today. That's what I wanted to cover. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks again for listening, and I will speak to you on the next episode.